In 2017, paramedics and police rushed to an apartment in Alta Vista, Iowa, after receiving a report of an unresponsive baby. When they arrived, the stench that emanated in the air only indicated the horrors that they would find. They were led to a darkened room where their eyes transfixed to a figure in the corner, a figure that they soon realized was a little baby boy, motionless in a powered swing set. It's around 12:57 p.m. on the 30th of August 2017 when paramedics and police were called to the Hilltop Avenue apartments on East Main Street in Alta Vista, Iowa. The caller, 28-year-old Zachary Koehn, said that he had found his 3-month-old son, Sterling, dead. According to Zachary, at around 9 o'clock a.m., the boy's mother, 20-year-old Cheyanne Harris, had fed him, and everything appeared to be fine. However, he said that when he checked on his son again at around 11:30 a.m., he was dead. Inside, paramedics and police were met by a scene of unspeakable horror. Little Sterling was found in a powered swing set in a bedroom of the home. It was a different bedroom than where the couple slept with their 2-year-old daughter. Suspicions were immediately raised. First of all, Sterling had been wearing a diaper that evidently hadn't been changed in quite a while. Even more disturbing, there were maggots in various stages of development on his skin and in his clothing. Sterling was also unnaturally thin, and there was blood coming out of his mouth and nose. The couple's other daughter was immediately removed from the home. The pathologist found that Sterling weighed only 7 pounds and measured well below the 5th percentile in size and weight for a child of his age. In regards to the maggots, a forensic entomologist was called in to determine a timeline. He was able to determine that Sterling had not had his diaper changed, had a bath, or even been removed from the powered swing seat in over a week. It wouldn't be until the following month, however, that the death was classified as a homicide, with Sterling's cause of death listed as failure to provide critical care. The criminal complaint concluded with, "The facts of this case go far beyond neglect and show circumstances manifesting an extreme indifference to human life." Zachary and Cheyanne were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and child endangerment resulting in death. They later changed their version of events. While they initially claimed that Sterling had been fed at 9 o'clock a.m. on the morning he was found dead, they now claimed that they hadn't actually checked on him since the previous day. It was clear from the evidence and the autopsy, however, that this too was a fabrication, and Sterling hadn't been checked on or cared for in quite some time. In fact, the maggots in various stages of development indicated that Sterling had been dead for longer than a day. In an interview with investigators, Cheyanne claimed that Sterling always let her know if he needed anything, so she didn't think to check on him. The gruesome death of Sterling was extremely disturbing, and many were left questioning if more could have been done to save him. Kellyanne McCrory, who was serving as the chief medical officer for United Healthcare Community Plan of Iowa, said, "I think figuring out where those opportunities are and using that tug on our heartstrings to make sure that we prevent it from happening again." She said that there were a number of programs they offered to assist parents with their newborn babies. They focused on postnatal checks because this is when it's easiest to identify any problems and intervene early. In Iowa, there is no law that requires parents to bring infants back to the hospital. Sterling was extremely underweight, and in other places where these laws exist, it would have been flagged long before he was found dead and covered in maggots. Zachary and Cheyanne had been on a slippery slope for quite some time. Cheyanne had been unemployed and living, at one point, with her mother. She was addicted to methamphetamine, and at the time of her arrest, she was in substance abuse treatment, having last used methamphetamine around 2 weeks prior. She was also in treatment for PTSD after being sexually abused when she was young. Zachary had also been addicted to methamphetamine. When he was 16 years old, he had been expelled from the Mennonite faith for smoking and drinking, and admitted that he began taking methamphetamine when he was 17 years old. Sterling had been born in a bathtub at a friend's home in May of 2017. Cheyanne hadn't even known that she was pregnant. Sterling was born premature. He'd be taken to the hospital where a red flag emerged when he was examined. A test on his umbilical cord was positive for methamphetamine. Despite this, however, for reasons unknown, state officials at the Iowa Department of Human Services were not made aware of this until after Sterling had died. Cheyanne would tell investigators about some of Sterling's issues following birth, which included feeding difficulties. Zachary had another son, Caden. In 2014, Zachary's parents, Willis and Marilyn Koehn, took over as his guardians. Zachary had said that he and his then-wife, who was not Cheyanne, had mental health issues. At the time of Sterling's death, Zachary worked as a truck driver and would sometimes be away from home for days at a time. According to his brother, Danny Koehn, he had expressed concern about Sterling being properly cared for by Cheyanne while he was away from home. In early November, Zachary and Cheyanne would plead not guilty to the murder of Sterling. It had been decided that the couple would be standing trial separately. Zachary's trial began first in October of 2018. During opening statements, prosecutor Coleman McAllister told the courtroom that Sterling had been in the same diaper for between 9 and 14 days when his body was found. He said that Sterling had ultimately died of diaper rash. He told the jury that the heavily soiled diaper had attracted bugs, which then laid eggs that hatched into maggots. The diaper rash led to ruptured skin, and coli bacteria set in. However, he would add that it was combined with malnutrition and dehydration. Zachary's defense said that Sterling's death was nothing more than a tragedy. It wasn't a crime, defense attorney Leigh Blair said. Prosecutor McAllister would refute this. He said that Zachary was not an inexperienced parent. He had 2 other children, one of whom was a healthy 2-year-old girl who had lived in the same apartment with Sterling. He said that Zachary had money to buy food and baby supplies because he earned $45,000 a year driving a truck from farms in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and southern Iowa to a processing plant in Charles City overnight. Speaking about Zachary's drug addiction, he said that a friend would come to the apartment to use drugs with him, and this friend was completely unaware that Zachary even had a baby boy. Speaking of Zachary, he said he directly caused Sterling's death. Jennifer Shriver, who babysat Sterling and his sister, told the courtroom that she had met the family shortly after they moved to Alta Vista in 2017. She said that one of the first things she noticed about Sterling when she met him was how small and light he was. She said that she noticed that Sterling was always raw with diaper rash, but he appeared to be otherwise clean and happy. She said that the next time she babysat in late July of 2017, she noticed that Sterling had gained a little bit of weight, and his diaper rash didn't appear to be as bad. The focus of the trial would then shift to the discovery of Sterling's body and his cause of death. Jennifer had lived near the family, and it would be revealed that she knew Sterling had died even before the paramedics and police. She said that she'd seen Zachary outside the home smoking a cigarette. He was pacing up and down, and she asked him what was wrong. The jury would next hear from nurse and county rescue squad EMT Tony Friedrich. She took the jury through the day that she responded to the home to find Sterling dead. She described how Zachary led her into the dark, hot bedroom where Sterling's body was sitting in a swing. She said that Zachary didn't show any emotion, especially not the kind one would expect after just finding their 3-month-old baby dead. Zachary turned on the bedroom light, muttered something, and then left the bedroom. She said that Sterling's eyes were wide open and he had a blank stare on his face. As she approached Sterling, it was evident that he wasn't breathing. When she checked for a pulse, his arm was cold and stiff. Tony said that she touched Sterling's chest to find his clothing was crusty, and when she moved his blanket, small flies flew up from underneath. She said the whole room was hot, and there was a stench of urine in the home. Her testimony painted an exceptionally disturbing portrait. Tina Shatek, a former first responder who had been on the scene with Tony, said that after it became abundantly clear there was nothing they could do for Sterling, she went outside to console Zachary and Cheyanne. Zachary told her that he'd been sleeping because he worked as a truck driver at night. She noticed that he was quiet and there were no tears. Sheriff's Deputy Jason Rossell described to the jury how the swing seat that Sterling was sitting in was stained brown, and the blanket wrapped around him was soaking wet with urine. There was such a putrid smell in the bedroom that it forced him to cover his nose. He said that he found fresh diapers bundled in the room but found no used diapers. There was a baby bottle in front of the swing, but the formula had started to separate, indicating that it had been there for quite some time. Next to testify would be Reed Palo, the chief deputy for the Chickasaw County Sheriff's Office. He had attended Sterling's autopsy and described to the courtroom that there were maggots and larvae on Sterling's body as the medical examiner removed layers of urine-soaked clothing and blankets. When Sterling's body was found in the apartment, he was wearing a hoodie that was much too large for him, a onesie, and a pair of camouflage pants. Deputy Palo said that there was an acidic smell that was distinctly different from decay, adding that the maggots were all in various stages. He said, "As the diaper came off, you could see the skin had broken down. It just looked like it had been there for a long time." He then spoke about how dire Sterling's condition was. Dr. Dennis Klein, the pathologist who had performed Sterling's autopsy, testified that Sterling weighed just under 7 pounds at the time of autopsy. He said that Sterling should have weighed around 11 pounds and weighed only a few more ounces than he did when he was born. He revealed the extent of Sterling's suffering in the last days of his life. He went through photographs that showed the condition of Sterling's body as he removed the layers of urine-soaked blankets and clothing and showed where maggots had hatched on the fabric. He said that there were 3 things that attributed to Sterling's death: malnutrition, dehydration, and severe diaper dermatitis, which is diaper rash and skin breakdown. He said that each of these things were serious enough to have individually caused Sterling's death. He revealed that the soft spots on Sterling's head had sunken from dehydration, which would have been obvious to anyone looking at him. The small size of his thymus, a gland in the chest, showed that Sterling had been under ongoing stress. He said that he wasn't able to determine an exact time of death, but confirmed that Sterling had been dead for more than a few hours. Timothy Huntington, a forensic entomologist, told jurors about the developmental stages of the maggots found on Sterling. While he couldn't determine when Sterling had died, he said he determined that his diaper was around 9 to 13 days old. Scuttleflies had been drawn by the odor emanating from the dirty diaper and would have fed on the stool and other bodily fluids inside the diaper. You don't find these flies laying eggs and growing and evolving in sanitary conditions. This fly would not have been there without the presence of feces and urine. He added that some of the maggots had moved from the feces, were crawling on Sterling, and were transforming into flies, which Sterling would have felt. A former friend of Zachary who had come to his home to take drugs testified that he had no idea Zachary even had a baby boy. Jordan Clark told the jury that he knew Zachary had a young daughter because Zachary would often speak about her and he had seen her in the apartment. He told the courtroom that he, Zachary, and Cheyanne would often smoke methamphetamine at their home, and Zachary typically bought between $20 to $40 worth of meth each week. On the morning that Sterling's body was found, Zachary had actually called up Jordan and told him he had misplaced a black bag containing some methamphetamine as well as a scale. Jordan said he made the comment that he needed to find it before anyone else did. DHS caseworker Sheila Schroeder told the jury that after Sterling died, his sister was removed from the home and placed into care. This was the first time that DHS had any contact with the family. 2 days later, she met with Zachary, who was laughing and appeared happy throughout the meeting. This struck her as odd, as parents in similar situations are usually angry, frustrated, or upset. Zachary told her he believed that Sterling had died of sudden infant death syndrome and admitted that he had used meth a couple of times a week, giving Cheyanne what he referred to as his leftovers. Under cross-examination by defense attorney Rehozel, she said that there had been earlier warning signs of drug use, but they hadn't been made aware of them. When Sterling was born, his umbilical cord had tested positive for methamphetamine, indicating that Cheyanne had used the drug while pregnant or exposed Sterling to it after his birth. When asked if hospitals are mandatory abuse reporters, the response was yes. He then inquired if methamphetamine in an umbilical cord qualified as child abuse that should be reported, to which the response was also yes. It was revealed that the hospital had not fulfilled its legal obligation by failing to report the presence of methamphetamine. Zachary would testify on his own behalf, blaming Sterling's death on Cheyanne. He said that he entrusted her to care for their son, stating, I put my trust in the wrong person. He mentioned working 70 to 80 hours a week as a truck driver, while Cheyanne stayed at home with the children, leading to opposite sleeping schedules. He explained that when he was off work, Sterling was typically asleep, and he didn't want to disturb him. He admitted he had never changed his son's diaper, citing a weak stomach and recounting how he threw up when changing his daughter's diaper once. Zachary said he sometimes fed Sterling, but that was mostly Cheyanne's job. Under cross-examination, Zachary conceded that he took better care of his dog than of Sterling. He also admitted being a long-time meth user and providing Cheyanne with meth as well. Zachary claimed he only took meth to stay awake during long shifts and admitted that he supplied Cheyanne with methamphetamine, noting she became difficult to deal with when he didn't provide it. The jury heard an interview where Zachary claimed he came home in the early morning hours of August 30th, went to sleep around 6 a.m., and didn't hear Sterling cry that morning, contradicting what he had told DCI agents. On the witness stand, he clarified that he thought he heard crying, but realized he hadn't after speaking with Cheyanne. He said Cheyanne woke him up hysterically hours later, saying she had found Sterling dead. Under cross-examination, Zachary admitted he failed Sterling as a father, stating, "I should have stepped in. I had my trust in the wrong person. If I had known, I definitely would have stepped up." In closing arguments, Assistant Attorney General Denise Timmons told the jury that Zachary was guilty and home enough to know Sterling wasn't being taken care of. She suggested that Zachary left Sterling to die because he suspected he wasn't his son, although it was later confirmed that he was indeed the father. His defense team placed the blame on Cheyanne, arguing that Zachary worked long hours and didn't notice anything wrong. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before finding Zachary Koehn guilty of first-degree murder and child endangerment of Sterling. As the verdict was read, Zachary showed very little emotion. Zachary's sentencing phase followed shortly thereafter. No one attended to speak on behalf of Sterling or provide a victim impact statement. Zachary would be sentenced to life in prison. With Zachary behind bars, it was now Cheyanne's turn to stand trial. The murder trial opened at the end of January. During his opening statements, Prosecutor McAllister told the jury that this wasn't a case of a family who did not have the resources or experience to care for a baby. The apartment had all of the necessities, including clothing and food. He said that evidence would show how Sterling had suffered in the hours and days leading up to his death, that he'd felt unloved, uncared for, and unaided by his mother, who was in the very next room as he withered away. Defense attorney Nicole Watt, on the other hand, said that her client was not a monster. She said the monster in this case is mental health. The monster in this case is depression. On the very first day of the murder trial, Cheyanne would leave the courtroom crying as photographs of a lifeless Sterling and his swing set were displayed for the courtroom to see. Much of the same evidence that was presented during Zachary's trial was also presented during Cheyanne's trial, and much like the earlier trial, it depicted a terrible story. Much like earlier testimony, Cheyanne was described the same as Zachary, unemotional. DCI agent Chris Calloway would tell the courtroom that when he was interviewing Cheyanne, she told him that she should have checked on Sterling more and claimed that she had changed his diaper, given him a bottle, and then put him in the baby swing a day before he died. It was quite clear that this was false. Cheyanne had told investigators that she found Sterling that morning after she woke up and gave her daughter cookies. She said she left Sterling in the swing and woke up Zachary, who eventually called 911. Defense team had hoped to call on Zachary to testify as a defense witness, but he would exercise his Fifth Amendment and refuse. They would call on Dr. James Denard, a psychologist who determined that Cheyanne suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, major depression, and severe substance abuse. Dr. Michael O'Hara testified that Cheyanne had taken antidepressants following the birth of her daughter, but had quit taking them. He said that she had most likely begun to suffer depression again when she gave birth to Sterling. He said these episodes can last for a very long period of time. He said that she also used methamphetamine and marijuana, adding that chronic meth impacts cognitive abilities, the ability to parent, and the ability to focus on tasks. He said, however, that he expected to see depression have a much wider impact on Cheyanne and not just isolate her relationship with Sterling. He acknowledged that Cheyanne still managed to take care of herself, her daughter, as well as take care of her home. Under cross-examination, Prosecutor Timmons noticed that Cheyanne had told Dr. O'Hara that she didn't want to change Sterling's diapers, that she was tired of his crying, and her daughter would become upset if she paid too much attention to him. Defense attorney Aaron Holbacher would admit that the prosecution had proved their case for a conviction on the child endangerment case, but said there was no evidence of malice and therefore no evidence of murder. The jury would be sent off to deliberate, and it would take them around 5 hours to reach a verdict. They found Cheyanne Harris guilty of the murder and child endangerment of Sterling. She automatically received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sterling Koehn had only lived on this earth for 3 short months. Born with methamphetamine in his system, the odds were already stacked against him from birth. In those brief months, he endured more than many adults do in their entire lives. Confined to a dark and hot bedroom, reeking of urine and feces, Sterling slowly withered away until his tiny body could take no more. That's all in this file. Please be sure now to watch another video and of course press on screen to subscribe to my channel now because you wouldn't want to miss what's next. And I'll see you next time.